Another reason that Shakespeare has to write the play isn't just to explore the ideas of witchcraft or the flaws of the tragic hero Macbeth. It's also as a piece of political propaganda in support of the king. Now, one reason for this propaganda is that King James is coming to the throne following the most popular ruler England has ever had in Queen Elizabeth I. So there's obviously an incredible disappointment at her death in the country, and there are factions in the country who want to get rid of James I, as we shall discover. But the other reason that Shakespeare is interested in promoting James I is that theatre companies in Shakespeare's time relied on patronage. They needed a royal patron. And so James actually did become the patron of the king's players, um, and Shakespeare was one of the founding members, one of the 9 founding members of that group. So he benefited tremendously financially by ingratiating himself with King James. So Macbeth was first performed not, as you might expect, at the Globe Theatre, but actually at Hampton Court Palace, King James's palace, and his guest in 1606. So that adds a lot of evidence to the fact that he's written it specifically for the king. The storyline, like that of most of Shakespeare's plays, was not original. As you've seen, it came from Holinshed's Chronicles, and in this case was based on fact. The story was familiar to James. He had inherited the throne of Scotland through his ancestors, so it was believed, Banquo and Fleance, and the story of Duncan's murder was well known. However, the real Macbeth reigned in Scotland from 1040 to 1057. He killed his predecessor Duncan I and was in turn killed by Duncan's son Malcolm III. Events such as these were not uncommon in the barbaric feudal Scotland, families battling each other, of the 11th century. Of the 14 kings who reigned between 943 and 1097, 10 were murdered. So this is quite interesting, really, because if Shakespeare is portraying how King James is descended from Banquo and Fleance, he needs to be careful that he doesn't portray King James as part of this barbaric feudal state, descended, if you like, from a tradition of murderers who are stealing their kingship. And the reason he's got to be careful here is Queen Elizabeth died without leaving any children, and therefore there are relatives all over the country who think they've got a good claim to be the next King of England. James I was the son of Elizabeth's sister, which you might think was a really good connection. However, Elizabeth had James's mother killed. She was Mary, Queen of Scots, and she was executed by Queen Elizabeth as a traitor. So you can see how many people in England would be really suspicious of King James taking over their country, especially as his mother was a Catholic and Queen Elizabeth was a Protestant and violently anti-Catholic. And you'll probably remember the Armada invasion from Spain in 1588, only a few years before, which was a Catholic country trying to invade England in order to make it Catholic once more. So let's look a little deeper to see how Shakespeare changes history in order to fit this propaganda message to show how wonderful King James is. So Macbeth actually ruled wisely and well for 17 years. He was, to all intents and purposes, a really successful king. During his reign, the north and south of Scotland, instead of being divided, were united for the very first time. So he was a powerful ruler who made Scotland more powerful and better. He was defeated in battle near Aberdeen by Malcolm III, the son of Duncan I, who had invaded Scotland with the help of Edward the Confessor, King of England. Malcolm slaughtered Macbeth's family so that his own kingship would be established. So you can see that Macbeth's family has been completely eradicated. Um, he is the victim here, but Shakespeare changes that around in order to show the heroism of Banquo as a victim of Macbeth, because King James is supposed to have been descended from Banquo. So this marked the end of the purely Celtic, exclusively barbaric Scottish folk, as it led to the gradual breaking down of barriers between England and Scotland, and to the introduction of English ways and customs. And so you can see why Shakespeare would want to celebrate this moment when Macbeth is killed, because this is the turning point in which Scotland becomes more English. Um, and that makes it much less threatening that this Scottish king, James I, is becoming now King of England. Now the propaganda, the political propaganda, goes deeper still. Shakespeare's Macbeth, who commits the greatest of all crimes by murdering his king, finds he cannot live with himself and the consequences of his actions. So the play now becomes a warning to anyone who's considering killing James I. Well, the reason that is such a powerful message is that only the year before, in 1605, we had Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot, an attempt not just to kill the king, but the whole of Parliament. So this idea of the king being assassinated, which we had earlier with the witchcraft trials, is even more relevant when you consider that this massive assassination plot had just been uncovered the year before. So Shakespeare presents this as a rebellion against God and the order of creation. Macbeth becomes inhumane, and his crime is rightly punished by his death. So you have the element also of a morality play where the evil is finally punished and good triumphs. But it is more a warning to anybody who would consider killing the king that even if you then became king yourself, it would be a tainted kingship. You wouldn't be able to enjoy it, just as Macbeth is not able to enjoy it, and neither is his wife. Another way of looking at how Shakespeare is actually motivated by political propaganda is to compare the plays he was writing a couple of years earlier, under the reign of Queen Elizabeth, to the plays that he's writing under the reign of King James. The plays he wrote during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream, are often seen to embody the generally happy, confident, and optimistic mood of the Elizabethans. However, those he wrote during James's reign, such as Macbeth and Hamlet, are darker and more cynical, reflecting the insecurities of the Jacobean period. And Macbeth was written during the year of the Gunpowder Plot, and then performed the year afterwards. So another way of looking at this is to suggest that Macbeth is tapping into King James's psyche and his mood and producing plays that match the way King James thinks. Or we could look at them as a reaction to the zeitgeist, the views of people at the time. And because people at the time are feeling more insecure and more worried, then these are the people that Macbeth is writing for. And consequently, he writes tragedies involving deeply psychologically troubled men. So, as I told you earlier, Queen Elizabeth died in 1603 without any children. And so James, the son of the Catholic Mary, Queen of Scots, Queen Elizabeth's sister, was next in line. He had been brought up a Protestant himself, and he'd kept Scotland as a Protestant regime when he came of age, when he became King of Scotland. And so on the face of it, he was an acceptable choice for England. But his accession was by no means a popular choice with everyone, since he was not a direct descendant of Queen Elizabeth. And there were other relatives who believed they also had a strong claim. At first, the Catholics had hoped James might support them, since Mary, Queen of Scots, his mother, had been a staunch Catholic. But when they realised this would not happen, conspiracies developed, such as the Gunpowder Plot. Guy Fawkes and his men tried to blow up the whole of Parliament in 1605. The conspirators were betrayed, horribly tortured on the rack until they confessed. They were then executed in the most brutal fashion. As a warning to other would-be traitors, Shakespeare's play Macbeth is to some extent a cautionary tale warning any other potential regicides, king-killers, of the awful fate that will inevitably overtake them. So that brings us back to that political propaganda again. So we can read the play as a bit of political opportunism, where Shakespeare chooses to write a play purely in order to serve a new master, King James, and get financial security. In my next video, however, I'm going to suggest that Shakespeare might actually have been a Catholic himself and subtly writes the play in order to promote Catholicism. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe.